Her journey. Directors loved her dedication. Critics loved her honesty. Audiences loved her warmth. In the heart of Oxford, England, on January 3rd, 1996, a little girl was born who would one day take Hollywood by storm. Her name was Florence Pugh, and though no one could have predicted it at the time, this child would grow up to become one of the most versatile and captivating actresses of her generation. Florence didn't come from a typical showbiz background. Her father, Clinton Pugh, was a restaurateur, a man who built his life around flavors and creativity in the kitchen, while her mother, Deborah, was a dance teacher, someone who believed in the power of movement and expression. Creativity flowed in the Pugh household, but not in the way of red carpets and flashing cameras. Instead, it was in the everyday through food, art, music, and storytelling. From the very beginning, Florence wasn't like most kids. She had an energy that couldn't be contained. As a child, she struggled with tracheomalacia, a medical condition that caused her breathing to be difficult and wheezy. While many would have let that hold them back, Florence's family remembers her as someone who fought through it with stubborn determination. Her health struggles forced her to see the world differently. Life was fragile, but it was also worth living fully. When she was 6 years old, Florence and her family moved to Spain for a while. It was there, in the warmth of Andalusia, that young Florence first began to fall in love with performing. The Spanish culture, with its music, colors, and passion, sparked something inside her. She would put on little plays for her family, singing and dancing, already showing signs of the fearless performer she would one day become. But moving back to England wasn't easy. Florence often felt like she didn't quite fit in with other kids. She wasn't interested in being quiet or ordinary. She wanted to stand out, to be heard. Teachers noticed her bold personality, and sometimes it even got her into trouble. Yet, her unique spark couldn't be ignored. Deep down, Florence knew she was meant to tell stories, not just her own, but those of people who lived and loved in extraordinary ways. Her first taste of the stage came in school productions. Unlike other children who were nervous under the spotlight, Florence thrived there. She wasn't afraid to look silly, to cry, to shout, or to lose herself completely in a role. It was as if, even as a child, she understood that acting wasn't about pretending, it was about feeling. Florence's siblings, Arabella, Rafaela, and Toby, were all creative in their own ways. In fact, her brother Toby Sebastian would go on to become a musician and actor himself. Growing up in such a supportive, expressive family meant that Florence had the freedom to dream big. And she did. By her early teens, Florence had made up her mind. She wasn't going to live an ordinary life. She wasn't going to settle for a small stage or a quiet role in the background. She wanted the world to see her, to feel what she felt, and to remember her. Even though the road ahead was uncertain, even though the dream of becoming an actress was so big it seemed almost impossible, Florence was ready to chase it. And soon, her first big chance would come knocking. By the time Florence Pugh reached her mid-teens, her desire to act was no longer just a childhood dream. It was a burning passion, something she needed to do. At school, her teachers and peers had already seen her talent, but Florence wasn't interested in being just the best actress in class. She wanted the world to see what she could do. At 17, Florence made a bold decision. She auditioned for a feature film. It was a schoolgirl drama called The Falling, 2014, starring Maisie Williams, who was already famous from Game of Thrones. For Florence, who had never appeared on screen before, this was an intimidating step. Imagine walking into an audition room, surrounded by other hopefuls, with no big-name agent backing you, no connections, no famous parents. Just raw talent and determination. But Florence didn't let nerves control her. She walked into that room, read her lines, and lived her character so fully that the casting directors were stunned. She wasn't just reciting words, she was embodying emotions, pain, longing, fear, joy. That was Florence's gift. Authenticity. She didn't act like someone else. She became them. When The Falling premiered, critics and audiences alike noticed something remarkable. a newcomer who radiated screen presence. Though it was her very first role, Florence's performance was haunting, mature, and unforgettable. She wasn't just another actress trying to make it. She was a star in the making. But as is often the case in Hollywood, a great debut doesn't guarantee immediate success. Florence faced the same struggles that so many young actors do: endless auditions, countless rejections, and the crushing doubt of whether she had chosen the right path. Her second big test came with Studio City, 2015, a pilot for an American TV show. Florence traveled to Los Angeles, auditioned, and landed the role. For a moment, it felt like the big breakthrough she had been waiting for. But then, the show wasn't picked up. All that excitement, all that hope, disappeared in an instant. For many young actors, this kind of setback is enough to make them quit. But Florence wasn't built to quit. Instead, she went back home, regrouped, and reminded herself why she started. Because she loved acting, not fame. And soon, fate rewarded her persistence. In 2016, Florence took on a role that would change everything for her: Lady Macbeth. This wasn't Shakespeare's Macbeth. Instead, it was a dark, Gothic drama about a young woman in 19th century England, trapped in a loveless marriage, who discovers her power through rebellion, manipulation, and violence. The role of Catherine Lester required an actress who could be both vulnerable and terrifying, someone who could carry the entire story with nothing but pure, raw performance. Florence wasn't just good in Lady Macbeth, she was extraordinary. Critics across the world praised her as a revelation. She brought such intensity, such command of the screen, that it was impossible to look away. The film wasn't a blockbuster, but in the world of cinema, it made one thing clear: Florence Pugh was here to stay. From the BAFTA Rising Star nomination to the growing buzz in Hollywood, Florence had officially arrived. But what made her different from so many other young actresses was her fearlessness. She didn't chase glamorous roles or easy characters. She chose complexity. She wanted stories that unsettled audiences, that forced them to think, that left them shaken. And soon, this boldness would carry her into bigger roles, across international projects, and eventually to the doors of Hollywood itself. Florence was no longer the girl with dreams of acting. She was becoming the woman who would redefine what it meant to be a leading actress in the modern era. After the critical success of Lady Macbeth, 2016, Florence Pugh's career trajectory shifted dramatically. She was no longer just a newcomer with potential. She was now being recognized as one of the brightest rising stars in cinema. Critics admired her fearlessness, directors admired her depth, and audiences admired her honesty on screen. But Florence knew she couldn't stop there. To truly break into Hollywood, she needed the right projects, roles that would push her further, challenge her craft, and show the world her range. Her next big opportunity came in Outlaw King, 2018, a historical epic produced by Netflix, where she starred opposite Chris Pine. Florence played Elizabeth de Burgh, the loyal wife of Robert the Bruce. While the film centered largely on Pine's character, Florence once again stood out. Even in supporting roles, her ability to bring authenticity and quiet strength to the screen made people take notice. But 2019 was the year that would change everything for her. It was quite simply the year of Florence Pugh. Fighting with My Family, 2019. The year began with Fighting with My Family, a biographical sports drama about WWE wrestler Paige. At first, many doubted whether Florence, an English actress known for serious dramas, could convincingly play a professional wrestler. But Florence proved everyone wrong. She trained rigorously, learned wrestling techniques, and completely transformed herself into Paige. What could have been a lighthearted, forgettable sports film turned into an inspiring, emotional story of ambition, family, and identity, largely because of Florence's heartfelt performance. She made audiences laugh, cry, and cheer for Paige's journey, and critics once again applauded her dedication. Midsommar, 2019. Just months later, Florence shocked audiences with her chilling performance in Ari Aster's Midsommar. Unlike anything she had done before, Midsommar was a psychological horror set in broad daylight, a a story about grief, toxic relationships, and cult-like rituals. Florence played Dani, a young woman grieving the horrific loss of her family, who travels with her boyfriend to a seemingly peaceful Swedish village, only to uncover a terrifying reality. This role demanded everything: emotional vulnerability, physical endurance, and a deep understanding of trauma. Florence delivered one of the most haunting performances of the decade. Her cries of pain, her confusion, her eventual descent into acceptance of the cult. It was raw, unforgettable, and almost too real. Many viewers admitted that watching Florence in Midsommar felt less like acting and more like witnessing a real person unravel on screen. The performance cemented her status as not just a rising star, but one of the finest young actresses in the world. Little Women, 2019. As if Midsommar wasn't enough, Florence then starred in Greta Gerwig's Little Women, released later the same year. Playing Amy March, a character often disliked in previous adaptations, Florence completely redefined her. Instead of being portrayed as spoiled and shallow, Florence's Amy was ambitious, witty, vulnerable, and deeply human. She captured both the frustrations and dreams of a woman struggling against the limits of her era. The result? Audiences finally understood Amy. They empathized with her choices. For the first time, Amy March wasn't the least-liked sister. She became one of the most complex and relatable. Florence's work in Little Women earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress at just 24 years old. Imagine that. In a single year, Florence Pugh starred in a wrestling biopic, a psychological horror masterpiece, and a timeless literary adaptation. 3 completely different roles, each delivered with brilliance. Hollywood was no longer just noticing Florence Pugh. Hollywood was celebrating her. The Florence Pugh effect. What made her rise so extraordinary was her willingness to embrace risk. Florence didn't chase only glamorous roles or big paychecks. She chased stories that mattered, characters that challenged her, and films that gave her space to transform. Directors began calling her a once-in-a-generation talent. Audiences began following her career with excitement. And Florence herself, humble, grounded, and deeply committed to her craft, remained focused not on fame, but on telling stories with truth. 2019 wasn't just a breakout year for Florence Pugh. It was a statement. A new leading actress had arrived, and she was here to stay. By the end of 2019, Florence Pugh had already proven herself as one of the most versatile young actresses of her generation. But the best was yet to come. Hollywood was watching closely, and soon, Florence's career took a leap that would introduce her to millions of new fans around the world. The Marvel Cinematic Universe. Joining Marvel, the Black Widow opportunity. She never let Marvel define her entire career. Instead, she balanced big studio films with daring artistic choices. She starred in Don't Worry Darling, 2022, a psychological thriller directed by Olivia Wilde. Though the film became infamous for its off-screen controversies, Florence's performance was praised as the movie's strongest element. She played Alice, a housewife trapped in a seemingly perfect suburban life that slowly unravels into a nightmare. Once again, Florence proved her ability to carry an emotionally intense story. In 2022, she also appeared in The Wonder, a period drama where she played a nurse investigating a young girl's supposed miraculous fasting. The role showcased her subtlety, grace, and deep commitment to characters who live on the edge of mystery and truth. Florence wasn't just taking any role. She was carefully choosing projects that expanded her range and kept her artistry alive, even while starring in some of the biggest franchises in the world. Oppenheimer and global acclaim. Then came Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, 2023, where Florence played Jean Tatlock, the complicated and tragic love of J. Robert Oppenheimer. Though her screen time was brief compared to others, Florence's presence was unforgettable. She gave Jean Tatlock a vulnerability and intensity that lingered long after the credits rolled. Her ability to leave such an impact with limited scenes only further proved her power as an actress. And being part of Nolan's blockbuster meant Florence wasn't just a rising star anymore. She was now firmly among Hollywood's most respected talents. The Florence Pugh identity. By this stage, Florence had achieved something rare. She wasn't just famous, she was admired for her craft. Fans loved her not only for her roles, but for who she was off-screen. Authentic, unapologetic, and refreshingly grounded. She didn't pretend to be perfect. She cooked on Instagram, shared parts of her real life, laughed at herself, and spoke openly about her journey. Directors loved her dedication. Critics loved her honesty. Audiences loved her warmth.